when even thunder learns to lie. In Greek mythology, Zeus stands as the supreme ruler of gods and men, the embodiment of thunder, law, and cosmic authority. His lightning was meant to represent truth, swift, absolute, and impossible to deny. Yet behind the blinding flashes of the sky lies a far more unsettling reality. Even thunder can lie. Beyond the throne of Olympus, Zeus was not only a god of order, but a master of deception. His power did not stop at ruling the heavens. It extended into the hearts, bodies, and destinies of countless goddesses and mortal women. Disguised as beasts, storms, shadows, and even beauty itself, Zeus crossed boundaries that no one dared to challenge, because no one could. These were not simple love affairs. They were carefully concealed encounters, wrapped in illusion and imbalance. Many never knew the truth until it was too late, until desire turned into abandonment and passion into punishment. For when Zeus departed, he left behind more than broken vows. He left lives shattered beneath the weight of divine consequences. Whispered myths suggest that Olympus itself knew this truth, yet chose silence. The thunder that shook the earth did not always announce justice. Sometimes, it concealed betrayal. And so a disturbing question emerges from the storm clouds. When the most powerful god bends truth to satisfy desire, can love exist without deception? In the world of Zeus, even the sky does not tell the whole story. Part 1. Zeus, the god of absolute power and unlimited desire. Power, when left unchecked, rarely confines itself to duty alone. In the case of Zeus, supreme ruler of Olympus, power did not merely govern the skies. It reached into desire, intimacy, and control over others. To understand Zeus's countless affairs is not simply to catalog his lovers, but to confront a deeper truth. His sexual dominance was an extension of his divine authority. Zeus did not separate rule from indulgence. For him, sovereignty over the cosmos implied sovereignty over bodies, choices, and destinies. Desire was not a weakness to be restrained, but a privilege to be exercised. The illusion of the ideal king. On Olympus, Zeus appeared as the perfect ruler. He upheld law, punished chaos, and maintained balance among gods and mortals alike. His thunderbolts symbolized justice. His throne embodied stability. To the ancient world, this image was reassuring, a single, all-powerful figure guarding order against collapse. Yet beneath this ideal lay contradiction. A ruler who demands loyalty but offers none. A god who condemns excess while indulging endlessly. A protector of marriage who repeatedly violates it. Zeus's authority insulated him from consequence. His position did not merely excuse his behavior, it legitimized it. Marriage as symbol, not commitment. Zeus's union with Hera, goddess of marriage, was meant to represent cosmic harmony. In reality, it exposed the emptiness of vows when power overrides accountability. Hera embodied fidelity. Zeus embodied entitlement. Their marriage was not built on equality, but on dominance. Zeus did not fear betrayal. He was the betrayer. Hera's jealousy and vengeance became infamous, yet Zeus remained untouched, a reflection of how systems of power redirect blame onto victims rather than perpetrators. In a whispered, fictionalized myth, Hera once asked Zeus why he continued his affairs. Zeus replied, "Because I can." The answer needed no justification. Desire without consent. What modern eyes recognize as abuse. Ancient myth often disguised as seduction. Zeus rarely approached women openly as himself. Instead, he relied on deception, disguise, and imbalance. He became a white bull to lure Europa, a swan to approach Leda, a golden rain to reach Danae, a shepherd, a flame, a shadow, whatever form erased resistance. Desire without consent. What modern eyes recognize as abuse. Ancient myth often disguised as seduction. Zeus rarely approached women openly as himself. Instead, he relied on deception, disguise, and imbalance. He became a white bull to lure Europa, a swan to approach Leda, a golden rain to reach Danae, a shepherd, a flame, a shadow, whatever form erased resistance. These were not mutual romances. They were encounters shaped by power, asymmetry, fear, and confusion. Mortal women could not refuse a god, especially one who controlled storms, fate, and punishment. To resist Zeus was not to reject a lover. It was to risk annihilation. The language of transformation. Zeus's transformations were not whimsical. They were strategic. By abandoning his true form, Zeus removed the possibility of informed choice. Desire became manipulated. Consent became impossible. The god remained hidden while the woman bore the consequences. This pattern reveals something chilling. Zeus did not want love. He wanted access. And access, to a god, required no permission. A catalog of conquests. The sheer number of Zeus's affairs is staggering. Gods: Hera, Demeter, Leto, Maia, Dion. Mortals: Europa, Io, Semele, Danae, Alcmene, Callisto, and many more. Each union produced children, heroes, kings, monsters, whose lives were shaped by divine neglect and maternal suffering. Zeus rarely remained. He intervened only when his legacy was threatened, not when his lovers suffered. In a fabricated legend, Hermes once asked Zeus whether he felt attachment to those he pursued. Zeus laughed and answered, "Attachment is for those who can lose." Women as battlefields of power. Zeus's lovers became collateral damage in divine politics. Hera's wrath fell upon them, not Zeus. Io was transformed into a cow and tormented. Semele was burned alive. Callisto was exiled and turned into a bear. These women paid the price for Zeus's desire, while Zeus remained exalted. This displacement of punishment reveals a systemic truth. Power protects itself by redirecting blame downward. Zeus did not shield his lovers. He used them. Children of desire, heirs of conflict. The offspring of Zeus's affairs were rarely allowed peace. Heracles endured madness and endless trials. Dionysus was hunted from birth. Perseus grew up in exile. Helen became a catalyst for war. These children embodied Zeus's contradictions, extraordinary power born from exploitation. They were celebrated and cursed simultaneously, forever tied to the consequences of their father's indulgence. In one fictional account, Zeus views his children as proof of vitality, not responsibility. Each birth affirmed his dominance. Each tragedy was incidental. Desire as political strategy. Zeus's affairs were not purely impulsive. They often served political ends. By fathering children across regions, Zeus embedded his influence into mortal bloodlines. Kings claimed divine descent. Cities legitimized rule through Zeus's favor. Desire became governance. This strategy mirrors empire building. Spread presence, assert dominance, ensure loyalty. Love was not the goal. Control was. The god who could not be refused. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Zeus's sexuality is not the number of his affairs, but the impossibility of refusal. A mortal woman could not say no. A goddess could not challenge him. A wife could not leave. This is the ultimate expression of unchecked power, desire that encounters no boundary. Zeus did not seduce the world. He consumed it. The moral blindness of Olympus. Olympus knew. The gods whispered, watched, and remained silent. Some disapproved. None intervened. To oppose Zeus was to invite destruction. Thus, Zeus's behavior was not merely personal failure. It was institutional. A system that protects the powerful enables exploitation. Thunder covered truth. Myth softened violence. Tradition normalized abuse. Unlimited desire as a symptom of absolute power. Zeus's endless affairs were not proof of passion. They were symptoms. Symptoms of entitlement. Symptoms of invulnerability. Symptoms of a ruler who mistook authority for permission. His desire had no natural limit because nothing restrained it. In a world where consequences did not apply to him, restraint had no meaning. A god reflected in human history. Zeus's story is uncomfortable because it is familiar. Throughout history, powerful men have mirrored him. Rulers who used authority to justify indulgence, who confused desire with destiny, who left devastation behind while remaining celebrated. Zeus is not merely a mythological figure. He is an archetype. The question beneath the myth: was Zeus a god of love, or a god who weaponized desire? When power defines morality, desire becomes law. And when desire becomes law, those without power become expendable. This is the uncomfortable truth at the heart of Zeus's legend. His unlimited desire was not a flaw. It was the inevitable outcome of absolute power. Part 2. Hidden affairs, deception, transformation, and the pain left behind. If Zeus's unlimited desire was the symptom of absolute power, then deception was its most effective instrument. Rarely did Zeus pursue love openly. Rarely did he approach as himself. Instead, his affairs unfolded behind masks, illusions, and transformations, carefully designed to eliminate resistance, erase choice, and conceal responsibility. These were not romances written in the language of mutual longing. They were encounters orchestrated by a god who understood that truth invites refusal, while deception ensures access. Behind every legendary affair lies a pattern: a woman deceived, a god disguised, and a future irrevocably altered. The strategy of concealment. Zeus did not hide his affairs out of shame. He hid them because secrecy was useful. Secrecy protected his public image as ruler. Secrecy avoided direct confrontation with Hera. Secrecy ensured that consequences fell elsewhere. In myth, concealment is often framed as cleverness. In reality, it was a calculated strategy of power. By concealing his identity, Zeus removed the possibility of informed consent. The women involved did not choose Zeus, they chose illusions. An illusion, once broken, offers no escape. Transformation as a tool of control. Zeus's transformations were not acts of whimsy or romance. They were methods of domination. He became a white bull for Europa, not merely to charm her, but to appear harmless. He became a swan for Leda, a symbol of beauty masking intrusion. He became a shower of golden rain for Danae, bypassing physical barriers entirely. He became mist, flame, shepherd, or shadow, whatever form dissolved resistance. Each transformation served the same purpose: to control the terms of encounter. The women were denied the chance to recognize danger. By the time truth revealed itself, it was too late. The god had already claimed what he wanted and vanished. Europa, the innocence of trust. Europa did not seek a god. She encountered a bull. Gentle, radiant, and strangely intelligent, the white bull inspired trust. When Europa climbed onto its back, she believed she was safe. Only when the bull plunged into the sea did the truth begin to emerge. By the time Zeus revealed himself, Europa was already lost, carried far from home, family, and agency. In official myth, Europa becomes a queen, mother of kings. But this framing obscures the violence beneath the tale. Europa did not consent to exile, nor to divine possession. Her elevation was compensation, not choice. In a fictional retelling, Europa later asks Zeus why he did not come as himself. Zeus answers simply, "You would not have followed me." Io, silence as survival. Io's story reveals another dimension of deception, erasure of voice. When Hera's suspicion fell upon her, Zeus transformed Io into a cow to hide the affair. This act did not protect Io, it silenced her. She could no longer speak, explain, or defend herself. She wandered the earth tormented, voiceless, hunted by monsters sent by Hera. Zeus watched from above, intervening only enough to preserve life, not dignity. Io's suffering exposes the cruel economy of Zeus's concealment. When secrecy failed, the woman paid the price. Danae, desire without touch. Danae was imprisoned by her father, locked away to prevent prophecy. Zeus did not break the door. He bypassed it. As golden rain, Zeus entered her chamber without consent, without warning, without possibility of resistance. The myth often romanticizes this moment as divine miracle. In truth, it represents the ultimate violation, desire that ignores all boundaries, physical or moral. Danae did not invite Zeus. She could not escape him. She could not even see him. Her pregnancy was discovered not as love fulfilled, but as disaster revealed. Leda, beauty as disguise. The story of Leda and the swan is often painted as sensual and poetic. Yet beneath the imagery lies profound imbalance. The swan's beauty disarmed suspicion. Leda did not recognize threat. She encountered grace. By the time Zeus's identity became clear, the act was complete. This pattern recurs again and again. Beauty used to disarm, gentleness to deceive, transformation to dominate. Love, in Zeus's world, required illusion to exist. Semele, truth that burns. Semele's tragedy marks a turning point. Unlike others, she desired truth. Manipulated by Hera, Semele asked Zeus to reveal himself in his true form. Bound by oath, Zeus complied, and the sight destroyed her. Mortals cannot survive the full presence of a god. This moment is often framed as Semele's folly. But the deeper question remains, why was truth fatal in the first place? Because Zeus's power was never meant to be confronted directly. Truth, in his world, was lethal. Semele did not die because she was foolish. She died because divine power, when stripped of illusion, is unbearable. Callisto, betrayal and erasure. Callisto trusted Artemis, not Zeus. Zeus exploited that trust by taking Artemis's form. This deception is particularly cruel. Zeus did not merely disguise himself. He weaponized sisterhood. When Callisto's pregnancy was revealed, she was cast out, punished, and transformed into a bear. Her body became evidence against her. Her voice was dismissed. Zeus did not defend her. He merely ensured that their son survived. The woman was expendable. The legacy was not. The pattern of abandonment. In nearly every hidden affair, Zeus's involvement followed the same arc. Approach through deception. Claim desire. Disappear. What remained was not love, but aftermath. The women were left to face social ruin, divine punishment, exile, or madness. Zeus rarely stayed. He intervened only when the child's survival mattered, not the mother's suffering. This is not neglect. It is design. Hera's wrath and Zeus's silence. Hera's jealousy is legendary, but her anger was misdirected. She punished the women because Zeus was untouchable. Zeus allowed this because it preserved his authority. The conflict between Hera and the victims served Zeus perfectly. It distracted from his role. In a darker, fictionalized myth, Hera once confronted Zeus, asking why he never protected those he pursued. Zeus replied, "If I did, they would matter." Silence followed. Pain as collateral damage. Zeus's hidden affairs produced pain on a cosmic scale, yet pain was never accounted for. There was no reckoning, no apology, no responsibility. Suffering became background noise, an acceptable cost of divine desire. This normalization of pain is what makes Zeus's actions so disturbing. The problem is not merely infidelity. It is the systematic erasure of consequence. Why the affairs had to be hidden? Zeus did not hide his affairs because they were wrong. He hid them because they exposed truth. Truth that power relies on deception. Truth that authority fears refusal. Truth that desire, when unchecked, destroys lives. If the affairs had been open, they would have invited scrutiny. Scrutiny threatens myth. Myth protects power. Thus, concealment was essential. Myth as softened violence. Ancient myth often romanticized these stories, turning violation into poetry, coercion into destiny, trauma into legend. This was not accidental. By aestheticizing harm, myth made it bearable. By sanctifying Zeus, myth excused him. By glorifying offspring, myth justified suffering. Story became shield. The women who disappeared from history. We remember the sons. We forget the mothers. Heroes are named. Women are footnotes. This selective memory reveals whose pain mattered and whose did not. Zeus's hidden affairs were not only acts of desire, but acts of historical erasure. The cost of deception. Every deception leaves residue. Io wandered endlessly. Europa never returned home. Semele burned. Callisto vanished. Danae lived in exile. Zeus remained untouched. This imbalance is the true legacy of his hidden affairs. The question beneath the lies. If love requires truth, can deception ever produce love? Zeus's affairs suggest not. They produced heirs, wars, legends, but not intimacy, not equality, not choice. What Zeus sought was not connection. It was confirmation of dominance. And dominance, when disguised as love, leaves only pain behind. Closing reflection of Part 2. The hidden affairs of Zeus reveal a god who feared transparency more than guilt. A ruler who relied on illusion to preserve authority. A lover who could not tolerate refusal. In this light, Zeus's transformations were not acts of magic. They were acts of avoidance. Avoidance of accountability. Avoidance of consent. Avoidance of truth. And when truth finally emerged, it burned everything it touched. Part 3. Promiscuity or the abuse of divine power. For centuries, Zeus's countless affairs have been excused with a single word: promiscuity. He is portrayed as a god ruled by passion, overwhelmed by desire, a lover too powerful to restrain himself. In this interpretation, Zeus is flawed but familiar, a divine mirror of human weakness magnified by immortality. Yet this explanation is dangerously insufficient, because promiscuity implies excess of desire, not excess of power. And Zeus's actions were never merely about desire. They were about control. To understand Zeus honestly, one must ask a more unsettling question. When desire is backed by absolute authority, can it still be called love, or does it become domination? The myth of the unfaithful husband. The most common framing of Zeus reduces his behavior to marital infidelity. He is the unfaithful husband, Hera the jealous wife, the lovers unfortunate participants in a divine soap opera. This narrative is convenient and deeply misleading. Infidelity assumes choice on both sides. It presumes that the lovers entered freely, knowing the risks. But in Zeus's case, the imbalance of power was absolute. He was not simply another suitor. He was the sky itself, the law itself, the hand that decided fate. To refuse Zeus was not to reject a man. It was to reject reality. Thus, the language of adultery collapses under scrutiny. What Zeus practiced was not infidelity. It was entitlement enforced by divinity, power that eliminates consent. Consent requires the ability to say no without consequence. In Zeus's world, no such condition existed. A mortal woman faced with Zeus did not encounter a choice between acceptance and rejection. She faced a choice between compliance and annihilation, physical, social, or spiritual. Even when Zeus used charm rather than threat, the coercion remained implicit. The god who controlled storms, kings, and destiny itself did not need to threaten. His presence was threat enough. In one fictionalized myth, a nymph once whispered to the wind, "Is refusal possible when the sky is listening?" The wind did not answer. Divine desire as law. Zeus was not merely ruler of Olympus. He was the embodiment of cosmic order. His will shaped justice, punishment, and fate. When such a being desires something, desire itself becomes law. This is the most disturbing dimension of Zeus's behavior. His longing redefined morality in real time. What would be considered violence among mortals was sanctified when enacted by Zeus. Boundaries ceased to exist because Zeus defined where boundaries ended. Desire was no longer personal, it was institutional. The illusion of romance. Ancient poets wrapped Zeus's affairs in beauty, moonlit encounters, enchanted transformations, divine splendor. These aesthetic choices were not accidental. They softened what would otherwise appear unbearable. Romance became camouflage. By aestheticizing Zeus's actions, myth disguised exploitation as destiny. The language of love replaced the language of harm. The result was a cultural anesthesia. Pain rendered poetic, violation rendered sublime. In truth, romance served power. Why Zeus needed variety. Promiscuity suggests excess appetite. But Zeus's endless pursuit of new lovers points to something deeper, restlessness rooted in dominance. No single relationship could satisfy Zeus because satisfaction was never the goal. What he sought was affirmation, repeated proof that nothing was beyond his reach. Each conquest reaffirmed supremacy. Each submission reinforced identity. Each transformation demonstrated mastery. Zeus did not collect lovers. He collected confirmations of power. Hera's silence and complicity. Hera is often portrayed as the antagonist, cruel, jealous, vindictive. Yet her role is more tragic than villainous. Hera could not challenge Zeus directly. His authority was absolute. Her retaliation therefore displaced, aimed at women who were safer targets. This dynamic reveals a structural truth. Power protects itself by redirecting blame downward. In a darker retelling, Hera once tells a victim, "If I punish him, the world ends. If I punish you, order remains." Thus, Hera's cruelty becomes part of the system that preserves Zeus. The gods who looked away. Zeus's behavior did not occur in isolation. Olympus watched and remained silent. Athena, goddess of wisdom, said nothing. Apollo, god of truth, sang elsewhere. Hermes carried messages, but never warnings. Silence was not ignorance. It was survival. To challenge Zeus was to challenge the structure of existence itself. Thus, the gods participated not through action, but through inaction. Complicity took the form of myth. Children as justification. One of the most insidious defenses of Zeus's actions lies in the offspring. Heroes, kings, demigods. Their greatness retroactively justified their conception. If the child becomes legendary, the suffering becomes acceptable. This logic mirrors real-world power structures. Harm forgiven when productivity results. Trauma erased by achievement. The mother becomes a vessel. The child becomes evidence. The god becomes absolved. The mortal cost of divine freedom. Zeus was free because others were not. His freedom to desire relied on mortal vulnerability. His immunity to consequence depended on their fragility. His legacy was built on lives interrupted, altered, erased. Promiscuity suggests indulgence. Abuse of power suggests system. Zeus's behavior was systematic. The mortal cost of divine freedom. Zeus was free because others were not. His freedom to desire relied on mortal vulnerability. His immunity to consequence depended on their fragility. His legacy was built on lives interrupted, altered, erased. Promiscuity suggests indulgence. Abuse of power suggests system. Zeus's behavior was systematic. The fiction of mutual love. Some myths insist that certain lovers truly loved Zeus. But love, without equality, is distortion. Love cannot exist where fear is present. Love cannot exist without refusal. Love cannot exist when one party defines reality. What Zeus received may have resembled affection, gratitude, awe, but it was never reciprocal love. It was adaptation. A god afraid of rejection. Paradoxically, Zeus's abuse of power may reveal insecurity rather than confidence. Why disguise himself if his authority was unquestionable? Why deceive if devotion was guaranteed? Why avoid truth if love was genuine? Because rejection was the one thing Zeus could not tolerate. Truth invites refusal. Illusion prevents it. Power that must never be tested. Zeus's greatest fear was not Hera, rebellion, or chaos. It was the moment someone would see him clearly and still say no. That moment would expose the limit of his power. Thus, Zeus ensured it never happened. Modern echoes. Zeus's story endures because it is familiar. Powerful men excused as passionate. Institutions protecting abusers. Victims blamed for consequences. Beauty masking harm. Success justifying suffering. Myth does not belong to the past. It survives because its structures persist. The final question: was Zeus merely a god of many lovers? Or was he a ruler who normalized exploitation by cloaking it in divinity? The answer reshapes how we read myth and power itself. If Zeus represents unchecked authority, then his story is not about desire. It is about what happens when no one can say no. Closing reflection of Part 3. Zeus was not undone by excess love, but by excess permission. He lived in a world where desire faced no resistance, where truth was optional, and where consequence never climbed upward. To call this promiscuity is to misunderstand power. What Zeus practiced was not love multiplied. It was domination repeated. And as long as myth calls it romance, the thunder will never be questioned. Conclusion: when love becomes the privilege of the powerful. The stories of Zeus ultimately force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Love, when claimed by absolute power, ceases to be love at all. It becomes privilege. It becomes entitlement. It becomes something taken, not shared. Zeus did not lack affection or desire. He lacked limitation. In a world where no one could refuse him without consequence, every act of longing was transformed into an assertion of dominance. What appeared as romance in myth was, in essence, the exercise of authority disguised as intimacy. The women who crossed Zeus's path did not merely experience divine passion. They bore the weight of a system that placed power above consent and legacy above lives. Their suffering was softened by poetry, erased by heroism, and forgotten beneath the names of sons who inherited glory without the burden of their mother's pain. When love belongs only to the strong, it demands no permission. It silences resistance. It rewrites harm as destiny. And it teaches the world that desire, when powerful enough, needs no justification. Zeus endures not because he was misunderstood, but because his story reflects a recurring human failure, the tendency to excuse domination when it is wrapped in greatness. As long as power defines love, and love is denied equality, the thunder will continue to echo, not as a symbol of justice, but as a warning left unheeded. To question Zeus, then, is not to challenge myth. It is to challenge the systems that still mistake power for love. Part 3. a tyrant in the eyes of humanity, a deity in the judgment of history. When Zeus is judged by the people of his time, he may be condemned as a tyrant. When he is judged by history, however, the verdict becomes far less certain. This tension between immediate human perception and long-term historical memory forms the final and most profound layer of the question. If Zeus lived in the modern world, would he truly be remembered as a monster of oppression or as a necessary god who carried the unbearable weight of order when humanity could not? 1. The human gaze. Fear as the first judgment. To those living under Zeus's shadow, fear would be the dominant emotion. Fear precedes understanding, reflection, and gratitude. Human beings instinctively judge power by how it affects their sense of autonomy, and Zeus would represent the ultimate negation of choice. His presence alone would redefine freedom, not as a right guaranteed by law, but as a privilege tolerated by divine will. In the modern world, where individuality and personal agency are sacred values, this loss would feel suffocating. Even if Zeus rarely intervened, the knowledge that he could intervene at any moment would alter human psychology. Decisions would be made not according to conscience or law, but according to anticipation of divine reaction. In such a climate, Zeus would not need to act frequently to be perceived as oppressive. His power would speak louder than his actions. From this immediate perspective, Zeus would inevitably be labeled a tyrant, not necessarily because he is cruel, but because tyranny, in the modern imagination, is defined less by intent and more by imbalance. A being who cannot be resisted, questioned, or replaced is tyrannical by definition, regardless of how benevolently he behaves. Yet this judgment is rooted in proximity. Those who suffer under a system always feel its weight more intensely than those who later analyze its outcomes. 2. History's cold distance. Outcomes over intentions. History does not judge as humans do. It strips away fear, emotion, and personal suffering, replacing them with patterns, consequences, and results. While individuals remember pain, history remembers stability, collapse, survival, and transformation. If Zeus's rule were to usher in an era of unprecedented peace, ending wars, preventing extinction-level catastrophes, stabilizing a collapsing planet, history would struggle to condemn him outright. Textbooks centuries later might describe him not as a tyrant, but as a turning point, the moment humanity ceased to govern itself and was instead governed by something greater. This is where Zeus's image begins to shift. Tyrants are remembered not only for their cruelty, but for their failure. They fall. Their empires collapse. Their legacies rot under scrutiny. Zeus, however, does not fall. His immortality denies history one of its most powerful tools, the moral satisfaction of downfall. Without collapse, condemnation loses its finality. In a fictional future, historians might debate Zeus in the same way modern scholars debate ancient empires, acknowledging atrocities while admitting effectiveness. The language would soften with time. Oppression becomes absolute governance. Fear becomes deterrence. Tyranny becomes divine rule. 3. The burden of omnipotence. Zeus as a willing villain. One of the most compelling fictional interpretations of Zeus in the modern era is not that he is unaware of human judgment, but that he accepts it deliberately. Zeus may fully understand that he will be hated, feared, and cursed, yet chooses to rule regardless. Not out of arrogance, but out of necessity. In this interpretation, Zeus becomes a tragic figure. He does not seek love, worship, or moral approval. He seeks only balance. He understands that true order cannot be gentle, that peace enforced without fear is fragile, and that humanity, left entirely to its own devices, repeatedly flirts with self-destruction. By embracing the role of the tyrant, Zeus frees humanity from a heavier burden, the responsibility of absolute power over its own survival. He becomes the villain so that the world does not become one. History, with its cruel objectivity, may later recognize this sacrifice. This transforms Zeus from a simple despot into something far more unsettling. A ruler who knows he is morally indefensible, yet believes morality itself is a luxury the world can no longer afford. 4. Memory, myth, and the rewriting of identity. Over time, human memory evolves into myth. The details of Zeus's actions would blur, sharpen, and distort across generations. Those who lived in fear would pass down stories of terror. Those born into stability would inherit a world shaped by his rule and question why their ancestors ever resisted him. Statues would rise, not necessarily out of worship, but out of acknowledgement. Cities rebuilt after divine intervention would quietly credit Zeus for their survival. The language surrounding him would change. He would no longer be discussed in daily outrage, but in academic debate, artistic interpretation, and philosophical speculation. This is where history completes its transformation of Zeus. He ceases to be a political figure and becomes a civilizational constant. Children would grow up never knowing a world without him. To them, Zeus would not feel like a tyrant, but like gravity, inescapable, impersonal, and essential. In such a world, the concept of resistance itself would feel archaic. Why resist the sky? Why rebel against the storm? 5. Zeus and the hypocrisy of historical judgment. History often condemns failed tyrants and excuses successful ones. This uncomfortable truth casts a long shadow over Zeus's legacy. If he succeeds in preventing catastrophe, history may forgive what morality cannot. If he fails, even slightly, condemnation would be merciless. This exposes a deeper hypocrisy. Humanity claims to judge rulers by values, but often judges them by outcomes. Zeus forces this contradiction into the open. If billions live because he ruled absolutely, can history afford to dismiss him as merely a monster? In fictional future archives, Zeus might be compared not to dictators, but to existential safeguards, like an immune system that destroys cells without consent to preserve the organism. From this perspective, humanity itself becomes the fragile body, and Zeus the merciless but effective cure. 6. The silence of Zeus and the final authority of time. Perhaps the most powerful aspect of Zeus's historical image is his silence. He does not write memoirs. He does not justify himself. He does not defend his actions. History is left to interpret him without guidance, filling the void with speculation and projection. This silence elevates Zeus above ordinary rulers. Human leaders obsess over legacy. Zeus has no such need. Time itself becomes his ally. As generations pass, anger fades, fear dulls, and only structure remains. The world continues. Civilization survives. That survival becomes his unspoken argument. Eventually, even the word tyrant may lose its relevance. Zeus is no longer judged by human categories, because human categories evolved under his rule. 7. Final reckoning. Who truly judges whom? In the end, the question reverses itself. It is no longer whether humanity judges Zeus as a tyrant or a god, but whether Zeus judges humanity as capable or unworthy of self-rule. From the human perspective, Zeus is terrifying because he removes choice. From the historical perspective, he is terrifying because he may be right. His existence suggests that freedom, left unchecked, may be incompatible with survival on a cosmic scale. Thus, Zeus stands at the crossroads of fear and reverence. In the eyes of those who live beneath his thunder, he is a tyrant. In the eyes of history, he is something far more ambiguous. A force that ended chaos at the cost of innocence, a god who ruled not because he was loved, but because no one else could bear the weight of absolute power. And history, ruthless and indifferent, may ultimately render its quiet verdict, not in praise or condemnation, but in acknowledgement. The world endured, and Zeus was the reason. Conclusion. In the modern world, Zeus would almost certainly be branded a tyrant by human standards. His authority would violate every principle of democracy, accountability, and individual freedom that contemporary civilization claims to defend. He would stand above constitutions, beyond courts, and immune to moral outrage. Yet to reduce Zeus to the label of Baochua alone is to misunderstand the true nature of his power. Zeus is not merely a ruler who dominates others. He is a force that reshapes the very framework in which judgment exists. What ultimately defines Zeus is not cruelty, ambition, or desire for control, but absolute supremacy. His power is final, unquestionable, and unchallengeable. In a world plagued by hesitation, division, and fragile institutions, such power would impose order with terrifying efficiency. Humanity may resent him, fear him, and condemn him, yet it would also adapt to the stability he enforces. Over time, resistance would fade, not because Zeus demands obedience, but because his dominance leaves no meaningful alternative. History, unlike living societies, does not cling to ideals, it records outcomes. If the world survives, if chaos is restrained and extinction averted, Zeus's rule would stand as proof that absolute power, while morally unsettling, can be undeniably effective. He would not need love, worship, or approval. His authority would exist regardless of human judgment. Thus, whether seen as a tyrant or a god becomes secondary. The truth remains unchanged. Zeus embodies absolute power in its purest form. And in the end, it is not Zeus who must justify his strength to the world, but the world that must accept it, because no force exists capable of challenging him.